Hello everyone, welcome back to the Python Explorer. So now we're going to take a full look at Alice sending Bob a transaction. So we're going to go from the Genesis block creation to the chain creation to adding a block that has a transaction to it after being mined from the transactions done from Alice to Bob sending Ether after it's been validated and signed. After the block gets validated itself, it also gets put onto the blockchain, or it gets added. It's the chain after the Genesis node. And so this would be a real world end to end sender function. So this would be the full process minus the creation of the blockchain. But this just so we can get the same values, and when we trace, it's easier to trace. So when we run this, we are going to be sending a transaction from Alice. The sender is going to be Alice, and the receiver is going to be Bob. Everything's the same as the previous examples, but this time we're going through every single part of what happens. So from when Alice sends the raw transaction to then her account being verified, to then being the transaction being verified, to the transaction being added to the block being finalized, which means there's no more transactions to be added to the block, and the block gets put under for validation purposes for the proof of work. And so we're going to be going through all the debugging values that we were able to capture in our environment. So the following files that we did put debugging in, we have ABCPy, PowPy, ValidationPy, and TransactionsPy, because those are the libraries we use during this transaction sent from Alice to Bob. And as before, nothing in the main has changed other than the print statements, and we've put print statements in all of these as well, so we can see what's going on. So if we go back to our command line and we run it, we're going to see a very big output. Let's get that in frame. Awesome. So if we go back up to the top, so we have the private key, which we know that creates the VRS to sign the transaction, which also is how we validate the account. So we have the welcome to the logger right here. So part one, we created the chain. This is the type of chain we have at the location. We have the Genesis block information right here. So block header is 0. This is the hash resulting. It has no parent hash because it's the first one, but this can be the parent hash of block 1. So we created a VM, we have a location memory where it is. I still haven't been able to access how to print that out, but we're still working on that. Then we have the part 2, so we go through the users. So we're going to go through the transaction that Alice was going to send to Bob. So since she hasn't signed it and hasn't been verified yet, we're not going to have in the block the raw transaction header. We're not going to have VRNS, because that happens in the when we actually sign the transaction. So when we sign the transaction here, we see that there's no VRS over here, but when we do sign the transaction, we have after the data value, which would be up here, data equals B, we have the following fields, VRNS, and S, and that's the signature of Alice. And we know that because of the previous demo exercise we just did. But as we go down, we see the validation of Alice right here. This is the V, the R, the S. So that 28 is coming from here. That's the remainder. I don't know why it's 28. It could be an RLPX encoding thing. I just don't know why it's 1 here and 28 up there, but I'm sure there's a simple explanation. Then we have the transaction message. So that's going to be the values inside the transaction. And then we have the transaction itself. So this is transaction validation. So it's going to be 5789, but 22.4 is going to be lower. So that transaction has been validated right there. And now, so we're going to finalize the block, and then we're going to mine the block. So finalizing the block in this means that we're closing the block off for adding transactions. So this is right before we prepare to perform the consensus algorithm on it, essentially the mining or the validation part of the block. So when we do that, we're able to see the values right here, the proof of work nonce, that's the function that does the proof of work. We have our mining output 9974 as opposed to 111579, and we see back here the 1157 is 1 digit longer, so we can easily see that this block mining function is smaller than this. And then we come down here from the mining block hash, since it's going to be the first guess because we have difficulty of 1. The nonce going to be 0 because it's our first guess. This is the mixed hash we get from that nonce of 0. And this is the validation of the block itself once it gets added to the chain. So yeah, that's a real world example with the tie-ins between behind where the data comes from in the system itself. There are plenty more things to go grab in the system, but these are the things we are able to access now and make sense of and understand. And that's why we have the demos on it explaining what it does and how it grabs the values and everything like that. So thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos. Thank you so much. Bye.